Hi, this is Jennifer Lahl, the president of the Center for Bioethics and Culture. In a moment, you're going to see a video interview that I've done with a surrogate named Britni. Britni contacted me recently to tell me her story, and I thought it would be interesting to do it via Skype video. So it's a new format that we're trying as women come forward and want to tell their story. We're going to try to do a bunch of short video interviews so that you can quickly meet these women and hear them tell their story from their own perspective. So I hope you enjoy it and let us know what you think of this new format, okay? Sit back and listen to me interview Britni. What I always like to ask people first, because I think it's interesting for people to hear, like, how did our worlds collide? How did we come to, know one another?
Yeah. So after a surrogacy situation gone wrong, I reached out to my uncle who does pro-life education, and he got me in contact with you to help advocate on my behalf.
Yeah, that's great. So I do remember now that when the call came in that there was a surrogate in trouble, so we immediately started emailing, right? And tell me, what is it about you that made you look into surrogacy? Why were you interested in being a surrogate?
Well, I have 4 children, and I feel so blessed to be a mother. And I have a few friends that have struggled to get pregnant, and I do have a few friends that have also lost pregnancies and also infant babies. So that kind of just struck something with my heart that when I was done having kids, I wanted to reach out and help other mothers who were struggling.
Yeah, and you're a nurse, so did you already know about surrogacy through your nursing background, or did you see an ad and you thought, oh, yeah, I could do that?
Well, I did see an ad to be an egg donor or a surrogate, and I originally signed up to be an egg donor. That's how I originally wanted to help, but as a nurse, I kind of know how to do surrogacy and how the IVF process works.
Mm-hmm. And how much did money factor into this decision that you were considering?
A little bit. I knew that there, was compensation for that, and substantially more for surrogacy than egg donation.
Right. And would you have done it for free if somebody said, hey, we have somebody, but they can't afford to pay you? Would you be willing to be a surrogate if there was no compensation?
Probably not for somebody I didn't know. If it was close to me, I probably would do it, for my medical costs being paid for, maybe just time off work or something like that. But, for a stranger, like, any service, I would, expect compensation.
And then once you finally decided to say, okay, I'm not going to do the egg donation route, I'm going to be a surrogate, did you have a particular agency that you reached out to them? Or how did you find the intended parents that you eventually were matched with?
Yeah, so when I signed up with the agency, that branch person did my egg donation profile. And she was starting her own company, and so she had intended parents in mind she wanted to match me personally with. So she reached out and asked if I would consider being a surrogate for them, told me a little bit about them, and it took me months to kind of, decide if I could actually do that. And I think the main thing was, can I actually, have a baby and give it up? And, after learning about the couple and, knowing that they wanted a baby so bad, and knowing that in my heart I was done having kids, that, I was like, I think I can do this for them. So that's what brought me to the decision.
And you live in Ohio. Was the agency that you worked with in Ohio?
No, their original branch was Chicago, but the agency person in Michigan was the one that reached out for my area. And the intended parents were also out of state.
Out of state, okay. So did you meet them before entering into the contract and agreement with them in person, or did you meet by Skype? Or
we originally, met we talked on a phone call about kind of things that we expected. And then we did a Skype call, and then we did meet in person when I did all my screening with the doctors.
Okay. And then you entered into a contract with them. And
yes.
How much did they offer to pay you?
For a single pregnancy, $30,000.
Okay.
And then if it was resulted in twins, $40,000.
Okay. And so you move forward. You signed the contract. Yeah. They used their own egg and sperm. So was it the genetic child of the intended parents, both of them?
No, they actually used donors for both of them. So it genetically was not their child.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason you can explain that, or is that confidential? But I mean, we're not going to tell their names, but I'm just curious. Right. It's rare that you see a husband and a wife that are both, infertile.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that he's not infertile. She had previous cancer. So the medication she was on, she couldn't use her eggs because of birth defects.
Wait,
and he was older. He was 50.
I'm going to stop you there if you don't mind, because it chopped up, and I don't know if it's just the connection. So Start over again explaining the man's situation and the wife's situation. Okay.
I know that he's not infertile. He has a 12-year-old with a previous marriage, but she had prior cancer, so she couldn't use her own eggs. And then he was older. He was 50. So I think that they just wanted, a better chance of better genetics.
Okay.
So that's why they used donor.
Okay. So when they finally did the embryo transfer, did they transfer one embryo or two embryos?
I actually agreed to transfer two and carry twins. However, during the thawing of the embryos, because they were frozen, one did not survive. And the doctor saw that this embryo was multiplying fast and kind of just made us make a quick decision to just do the one. And so we just did one embryo.
Okay. And then did you get pregnant?
I did. Okay. Yep.
And then what happened?
And then we had the intended mother came down for my 6-week ultrasound. She was with me, and the agency person came down as well. And so that was kind of, a bonding moment, and we saw the heartbeat for the first time. As a precaution, they wanted me to kind of do a 12-week ultrasound just to make sure the baby was developing fine, just because, the risk with IVF and all of that. Well, with the 12-week ultrasound, we found out that the egg split, and I was actually carrying identical twins. However, they were conjoined at the abdomen.
Okay, so, and that was at how many weeks the diagnosis that the babies were conjoined twins was made?
At 12 weeks.
12 weeks, okay. And what's the month and the year that we're talking about? When did this happen?
I found out in November last year.
Okay, so November 2017. So that was a big bombshell that was just dropped for everybody's laps. In your contract, you had stipulated that you would agree to termination of the pregnancy. So there was what we call the abortion clause was in your contract. And once the diagnosis was made, what happened?
The intended parents, the doctors had said, this is the best case scenario for these types of twins. Usually they're sharing a liver and abdomen, or liver and bowel, which can be separated, and it's it looks hopeful as long as they develop normally. The intended parents took 4 days to think about it and told me to abort.
Mm-hmm. And then you obviously had 4 days to think about it too, with this news. And what was going through your mind in these 4 days when this was happening?
Just in shock. This is so incredibly rare. And for it to happen, to me, I was just so hopeful, I guess, that they would continue the pregnancy because we didn't know all the answers yet.
Yeah, and you even sought second opinions and saw a high-risk perinatologist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were still being told that these babies could very well have a normal, healthy life based on the nature of the conjoined twin diagnosis.
Yeah, they recommended that I go to the fetal center at 18 weeks and get more testing done and meet with the surgical team, they said.
So did you have to go then back to the intended parents and say, no, I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy? Or, how did that conversation happen where you had to tell them basically where you were in the decision?
It didn't reach that point. I knew in my heart that I wasn't going to terminate the pregnancy. I was just giving it some time to explore all my options. So medically and legally, I sought out lawyers that looked over my contract, also sought out, the second opinion of the doctors. But unfortunately, at 14 weeks, with my follow-up ultrasound, they saw that the babies no longer had heartbeats.
And did you feel during that period, up until the babies were diagnosed with no heartbeat, did you feel that the agency was being supportive? The people either in Michigan or Chicago, did you feel supported?
I didn't, no. The agency person was on their behalf. She said, Britni, they don't want to have babies with deficits. They don't want to have issues or babies that have to go through surgeries. She goes, my son has autism and it's so hard for them. You have to understand where they're coming from. So she was really on their side about abortion.
Okay. And how did you feel? I mean, how did this make you feel during this time? This is, before the holidays, and you should be all excited and happy. And
yeah, it was awful. Just because I put my body through so much for them. I was willing to, have a high-risk pregnancy for them and time away from work and my children. And I feel like once they found out I didn't have the perfect baby, I was just disposable.
Yeah. And then once the babies were deemed to not have heartbeats, how did that make you feel? Did you feel a sense of relief? At least I don't have to make that decision, or I don't have to have this conflict, or was that also sad?
Yeah, I mean, that did cross my mind. But at that point, I was just so devastated because I felt like everything was just going right. The lawyers gave me good news. The doctors were still hopeful. I was, hoping to fight the contract and potentially maybe keep the babies. And so when I found out there was no heartbeat, it was like my loss. Yeah. And not just, as a surrogate mother.
And then did you eventually have just a DNC?
Well, the next day, on the 30th, the doctor induced labor, so I was able to deliver naturally without a DNC.
Okay. And do you know the sex of the twins?
They were boys.
They're both boys. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then have you had any contact with the agency or the intended parents since then?
No, they haven't tried to contact me once.
Oh, nobody said, how are you doing, Britni? Or do you need anything?
Nope, not at all.
And the payments obviously just stopped.
Yeah.
Because usually, if it's my experience, surrogates are kind of paid a little bit up front, and then they sort of get a monthly stipend. Was that?
Yeah, it's up into monthly payments, yeah.
Yeah. And so, now that you've had some time and some space since this to think about it, revisiting the decision to be a surrogate, what are your thoughts now?
I definitely would have researched more. Once I decided to be a surrogate, you see all these amazing stories, and you never think to research the bad. You never think to say, well, what could go wrong? And if it does go wrong, is the contract in my favor? And what I experienced was when things went wrong, nothing was in my favor. I was the one affected, physically, mentally. I was the one affected by the contract. So it was devastating.
Yeah. And do you think that, it was more the onus is on the agency to inform you and talk to you about what could go wrong? Do you think the burden is on the surrogate mother to do that research and inform herself? The fertility doctor, I mean, there's so many people that you were working with, from lawyers to agency people to fertility doctors to intended parents. I mean, who's responsible for making sure you are informed and that you know what your risks are, if you will, and if you're willing to accept those risks?
Yeah, I think, the doctors and the agency should have went into detail more. Of course, they said, oh, yeah, you can have a loss, or, oh, yeah, they can tell you to abort. But, I mean, for them to really sit down and go over scenarios and how it would affect you, physically, and how it would affect you for the contract. I think that should be discussed more in detail when you're, agreeing to something that's major.
And do you think you'll consider surrogacy again now that you know more about it?
I don't think so. I think emotionally it was too hard for me to have that loss. And that's one of the reasons that I did it, is because of the women that have losses. And I couldn't imagine going through that. And then it did happen to me. I don't think I could risk, the physical and emotional stuff that I went through again.
And what was this like for your children? I mean, without disclosing their identities, are they old enough to understand what you were doing and going through?
Yeah, all of them knew. And I think they were as invested as I was, talking about the baby in mommy's tummy and the intent of my parents, and always asking me how the babies were. And so when they found out, they were really upset. And actually, my 8-year-old daughter, a week after the loss, she, drew a picture of angels and said, "I miss you, baby. Rest in heaven." And so it just goes to show you that, even though they're so young, they do understand, and they did understand that I had a loss, and it was, it affected them as well.
And do you have friends that have sort of known what you've done and what's happened to you that have been supportive or judgmental, or you shouldn't have ever done that, or, don't ever do this again, or how are you doing? I mean, where are your friends and your support group and family?
Yeah, my family has been very supportive. So my friends, I think everybody kind of took the journey with me, and everybody was devastated for me, not only with the loss, but just how I was treated in the whole situation.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel you were treated?
I felt like, I really wasn't valued for what I was doing, or valued as a human being. It was just, I kind of felt like just hired help. And when things didn't go right, well, we'll just throw her through the curb.
Mm-hmm. So if you had a young woman who came to you and said, hey, I know you were thinking about being a surrogate, you tried to be one, I'm thinking about doing this, I mean, what would you tell her? Would you say, absolutely not, don't do it? Or would you give her advice on how to do it and protect herself?
Well, I would give the opinion of not doing it. But then, I would give the advice on, if you do, to really think about how you can handle what can go bad, physically and emotionally, and also to protect yourself with the contract as well. They say you get your own lawyer, but they appoint that lawyer for you. So really, that lawyer knows what they want to say. And so I didn't really feel like I was fairly representative for somebody that was really looking out for me.
Yeah, and my position is I'm full stop against surrogacy. I spend my life working to shut it down. As a pediatric nurse, I'm a woman, I have daughters. I've seen, up close and personal, so many women and children that have just been harmed. Do you think my position is too hard-lined? Do you think there's, when you hear me speak or look at the work that I do you think, gosh, she's got this wrong or that wrong?
I don't think so. I definitely, see your views about it, and just how it's treated like a business transaction. and women aren't treated fairly, and it's hard. So
yeah, and, we're both nurses, so we can speak as nurses. And, for me, one of the biggest issues is that a contract or laws can't protect women's health, because your health is going to do what it's going to do regardless of what your contract says or the laws say. And so when I look at surrogates, especially ones who carry twins or triplets, which are high-risk pregnancies, that get into all these really serious health complications. Either, they die or they almost die from, really bad preeclampsia or whatever. I just go, there's no way to protect. And here you are a mom with 4, underage children, you're responsible for them. And I just think our laws should protect you to be healthy and safe to care for your own children.
Right, and I did experience some of that. When I delivered the babies, I actually hemorrhaged, and I had to get an injection to stop my bleeding, and it did not stop. I lost a substantial amount of blood and actually had to get a blood transfusion before I left the hospital.
I did not realize that. So see, there you go. And even though it was a relatively uncomplicated pregnancy, it was still very complicated, from the diagnosis of the twins to the miscarriage, the stillbirth of them, and then your own health. So, what would you say to the intended parents if they happen to stumble onto this video? I mean, we're not going to blab their names. We're not going to put your last name out there. But the world of social media gets around. What would you say to them right now?
I'm hurt and disappointed. For somebody who wanted a baby so bad, they were just so quick to just dispose of it. Babies aren't disposable. They're human, and I'm the one that felt life inside me. I'm the one that held the babies in my hands after I delivered them. And so they didn't realize, what this did to me. And I just don't think that they deserve to be parents.
Yeah. And then, you and I have been trying to coordinate, our interview today for quite a few weeks, and then everything kept getting in the way, as life does. And I know you're really interested in talking to the media and getting your story out there. I mean, what is your desire for getting your story out there far and wide? Is it more just to educate people? Is it to warn people? Is it some of all that?
Yeah, I think just to warn people of what can go wrong, and to educate women who are seeking this out or who are surrogates, to protect themselves, and, just to keep in mind that not all people are good, and not all people have the best intentions. And so you just have to be really careful.
Yeah. And are you prepared for any kind of backlash? I mean, that's one of the reasons why sometimes surrogates don't want to talk to the media and put their story out there, is, people can get ugly, and they, there's all kinds of nasty people in the world who love to use social media to call you all kinds of names. Are you prepared if that happens?
I am, yes. Okay. Stand by my decision. I wanted to do something great. Mm-hmm. It didn't turn out so well. I was proud to be a surrogate. And then when I discovered the bad, I'm like, oh, wow, this isn't what I thought. This isn't, I don't feel good about doing this now. And so I know there's still people out there that are going to say, oh, it's a great thing, and I had a great experience. But, things can go wrong. And not only that, but you have to think about the egg donation side. Like, what would that egg donor think about what happened with her genetics, So, yeah, it's great to donate your eggs and help a woman, but you have to think, like, what is she doing with that?
Right. Right. I often think that, too, when things go terribly wrong in these cases where there is an egg donor or a sperm donor used, they have no idea. They just thought, I gave my genetic material, and there's this happy, wonderful family out there, without realizing that it's this nightmare. Were you, just one last question I have, and it just popped in my mind. Were you part of any kind of a surrogacy support group, or in any kind of?
Yeah, once I decided to be a surrogate, I looked up, surrogacy groups on Facebook. And you don't really see much bad on there. It was all happy stories and people supporting people.
Right. Did you go on them after the fact and tell them what happened to you? Or once the pregnancy ended, did you just not participate in those groups anymore?
Yeah, I didn't go on and say anything. I was too broken at that point, and I knew that people would have negative comments, and I was just going through so much. I just deleted everything.
I think it's probably wise. I mean, my experience from surrogates who stay in those kind of forums, hoping to get support, when things go wrong, they're sort of shunned.
Yeah,
because they don't want any of the bad stories. It's just only the good stories. We don't want to rock the boat here, which is unfortunate.
That's what I think. If there was one little negative comment, everybody would kind of gang up on them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I knew that would probably happen to me if I did that.
So do you have any last thoughts or comments, or want to say anything that I didn't ask you about?
I would just say, to people out there thinking about doing this, when things go wrong, you think you're doing this and it's all going to be a happy ending. And when things go wrong, you're the one left with the effects forever. This loss is going to stay with me forever. And, to the intended parents, it was so far away and not real. And it's just that.